Alright, let's get started. Today's topic will be modal music, and when we think of modal music, there is a lot of different ideas. Most people probably know the diatonical modes of um, of modal music. Others maybe think of jazz modes, but today we are actually gonna talk about the earliest form of modes, which will be the Gregorian modes. And in the Gregorian scales we do have 8 modes. And let's get right started. Oops. So I've prepared this little presentation, and this is more or less our agenda for today. I'll be giving a short overview of the diatonical modal scales because those are the most well-known scales. Then we will go to the origins of modal scales, which come from Gregorian chant, and then we'll have a look at the 8 modes of Gregorian chant. And next we are gonna see how we can put them into cadences. By the way, this is just a sample picture of a jazz mode. We are not gonna treat that today, but maybe in a follow-up that hopefully someone else can do because I'm not good at jazz. Alright, so most theory textbooks that go about scales or about modal scales will give you this recipe. You take any major scale and you start at the first or second or third note of that scale, use it as root and just play that scale upwards. So if you start at the first step of C major and play up 1 octave, you get the Ionian scale or just the major scale. And if you start at the second step on the D, then you have a Dorian scale. Let's have a quick listen. Just pure major. And a Dorian scale would sound like this. It sounds a bit like natural minor, but the 6th step is raised. So if we had D minor, the 6th step would be a B flat, and we have a normal B, so the 6th step is actually sharp. A cadenza in D Dorian would sound like this. If you're wondering why I have flattened the 6th step, it's actually common practice in ancient or in archaic music to flatten this 6th step to make singing easier. And at the very end of a piece, often the 3rd would be altered into a major 3rd to get a more definite closing effect. Alright, next would be Phrygian. I'm just gonna play all the scales one by one. Again, we have the big 3rd because of the closing effect. Next one is Mixolydian. Alright. Appreciate it that someone is watching. Okay, and now Aeolian, which is just natural minor. Oh wait, I think I messed that up. That was Mixolydian, now comes Aeolian. And there is a seventh mode, the so-called Locrian mode, which starts on the seventh step, but it has a minor fifth, which makes the root chord a diminished chord. So it's not a stable root, so you can't really make a cadenza out of it. You can just play the scale. Okay, and if you were to translate all these scales to C, so that you have C as the root of every scale, you just follow the recipe. For Dorian, you have to find a major scale where C is the second step. For Phrygian, you have to find a major scale where C is the third step, and so on. So I'm just gonna skip through these really fast and have a listen. Oh, wait, I have to choose a different MIDI for that. Dorian. Phrygian. Lydian. Mixolydian. Aeolian. And Locrian. With the diminished fifth, so no cadenza. Now that we have had a look at the diatonical modes, let's go back in history and find out where the modes came to be. And the modes, also called church modes, come from Gregorian chant, which is a spiritual kind of song which started around 700 AD. It started as a plain chant, which means it's monophonic, so there is just one voice. Everyone was singing the same thing. There was no accompaniment, and it was sung during sacred Christian ceremonies. Used in Catholic Roman liturgy, and in the beginning, parts of the ordinary and the proper and the psalms were sung in Gregorian chant, and later on they added tropes, sequences, and hymns. I won't be explaining those because it's just all kinds of songs. And the only modes used back then were Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. The other modes didn't even exist back then. So back then you actually just had these guys. And that's it. Alright. And here is an example of a piece in Dorian mode. Oh, yeah, 2 viewers. Why not? Well, back to the example. This is Dorian mode, and if you're having trouble reading this, it's actually not that hard. We have a C clef, which indicates on which line we have the C. So on this line we have C, on this line we have A, F, D. We have no accidentals, so we're gonna use the notes of the C major scale. And how are we gonna recognize the Dorian mode? Well, easiest would be to look at the closing tone, which is a D in this case. So that gives us a pretty good idea which one is the root of this song. And I even have it linked on YouTube. Alright, and check whether it's really Dorian, we should just skip to the end and see if it does end on D. Oh, that was a bit too much. That's still too much. Come on. Alright, this just for an example, and here I have an overview of how the 8 Gregorian modes actually work. So, as we've said, we have the 4 modes of Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian and Mixolydian, and each of these modes comes in 2 flavors. One flavor is called authentic. Oh, that's bad. One is called authentic and the other one is called plagal. And the authentic mode, in the authentic mode, the melody just takes place above the root tone, and in the plagal mode, the melody takes place around the root note. So let's have a look. In Dorian, in authentic Dorian, the finalis or the root is the D, and the melody takes place between D and, well, D1. So it's 1 octave and above the root note. The tenor, also called cofinal, is the so-called reciting tone. It's a tonal center where you would rest the melody a lot, and the tenor for D Dorian would be on the 5th. Now if we were to have a look at plagal Dorian, you still have the same root, but the range of the tones is different. So it actually goes from below the root to the 5th, and the reciting tone is on the 3rd step. Same for Phrygian. For Phrygian, the reciting tone is not on the 5th because the 5th felt unstable, or the note B felt unstable. It would often be altered down to B flat, and then you'd have a diminished 5th. So reciting in Phrygian mode often happened on the 6th step instead. Again, the range of the notes starts at the root and goes up 1 octave. For plagal Phrygian, same root, different ambitus, different tenor. For Lydian, start on the 4th step of C, which is F. Tenor is the 5th of the root, ambitus, just as usual. And for plagal Lydian, again same root, lower range, lower tenor, and so on. And for Mixolydian, we also have a different tenor because we are trying to avoid B, which can prove unstable. Alright, next. So let's just hop in and have some examples. Here I have a piece in Phrygian mode, Kyrie, which sounds like this.
Kyrie eleison. Kyrie.
This part is going to be repeated 3 times. Well, I'm just gonna skip to the end because I'm gonna skip to the end because we're of course interested in seeing what the actual finalis mode is. Alright, so for Phrygian mode we have to have the finalis of E. And if we count lines, C, A, F, E. Well, this is an E. That works. Our tenor should be on the C, so there should be a whole lot of the note C in this score, which mostly holds true, as we can see. So here we go up to D, and our ambitus should be around 1 octave from the lower E. And as we can see, the lowest note is actually a D, and the highest note is also a D. So it's still well within the range. And that's a piece in Phrygian mode. Next example would be this hymn, Ubi Caritas, which is in Hypo-Lydian. So our finalis is on the F, since it's the same as Lydian. But our ambitus starts a bit lower on the C and should end around C as well. The tenor should be on the A. So let's have a quick look at the score. C, A, F. This should be our root. And it indeed is. The closing tone would be this one. The Amen is just added, but it also ends on F. If there's two notes above each other, you first sing the lower note and then the higher note, so it does end on F. Now our tenor should be on the A, and A should be this one. Well, we do have a whole lot of notes on the A, so that's definitely the tenor. Okay, and the ambitus should be between C and C, so the highest note should be around C. Let's see, I think the highest note is even just a B flat. And the lowest note should be this guy. That's a C. So our ambitus is actually B flat to C, well within range. Therefore, typical Hypo-Lydian piece. Yeah, I'm sorry for burning German. Well, let's have a quick listen. Well, they skipped the Amen, but whatever. Okay, and the last example would be, let me check, a short one of Hypo-Mixolydian. So we have this introibo. It's a prayer spoken by the priest at the altar when he enters the altar, but only in the old Latin form of the Catholic Mass. And for Hypo-Mixolydian mode, we should have G as finalis. We should have an ambitus between D and D, and we should have a C as tenor. So let's check the final note. C, A, G. Check. Let's check the tenor, which should be on the C line. Well, we do have a whole lot of C's. Here we have the D stropha, the repeated tone. Here we have C's. Yeah, C is definitely the reciting tone, and the ambitus should be between the high D, but actually our lowest note here is the F. So it's not quite as large as the full ambitus, but it's within range. Therefore, introibo is hypomixolydian. And that's how it sounds.
Introibo ad altare Dei, ad Deum qui letificat juventutem meam.
What's up, guys? I'm here today at Free.
Misclicked. Sorry for that. And since Gregorian chant was being sung monophonic, means you had no accompaniment. So back then, chords to go with the melodies were a non-issue actually. But after a couple hundred years of singing monophonic, people tried adding more voices and making it more interesting. The first thing that people tried was to just sing in parallel. So like one guy would sing the melody a bit higher pitched and a different guy would try to sing it lower or higher. And they tried moving in parallel fourth or parallel fifth. And that would sound like this. Well, it's not very pretty in today's terms. But at least it was polyphonic, so it's a beginning. Later on, like around 1000 AD, composers started to add independent voices to already existing melodies. And whenever those melodies came to a end, or whenever the phrases within the melody came to an end, they would have a closing formula, so that the original voice and the added voice would all end up on the root or on the finalis. And there were different ways to have the voices reach the finalis, either from one note below, and that was called a discant clausula. So the final note or the root note is reached by going up from the 7th step. Depending on the mode, that step may have been flat or not. And if the root is being reached from one tone above, it's called a tenor clausula. These clausulas didn't have to be actually in the tenor or soprano voice, but it's more important how they reach the final note. So you could find a discant clausula also in a tenor voice or even in a bass voice. And those were the prevalent clausulas of closing phrases or sentences. Then there came the alto clausula, which ends on the 5th step, either straight from the 5th step or from below, from the fourth step, which may be sharp, depending on the mode. And last but not least, we have the bass clausula, which is basically just a jump from the 5th step to the 1st step. And if you have multiple voices and each voice uses a different clausula, you get something that's very similar to a cadenza or to a cadence. For example, if we put a discant clausula into the soprano voice, put an alto clausula into the alto voice, and a tenor clausula in the tenor voice, we get the so-called parallel clausula, which sounds like this. Well, still not very pretty, but better than what we had before. And there is a multitude of clausulas, and here are just some examples. Next one would be the Landino clausula, which is almost the same like the parallel clausula, but the soprano voice actually forms a perfect fifth with the tenor voice for a sec, and then resolves into the root. And that sounds like this. Then again, if you use these kinds of clausula, you can actually just build a standard cadence that would work according to today's standards actually. So if you took a a dissonant clausula in the soprano, a tenor clausula in the tenor, and a bass clausula in the bass, and skip the alto clausula, then you'd have a very typical 1-5-1 cadence, which sounds like this. There is some terminology behind this. The last chord of a clausula is called the ultima. The one before that is called penultima. And the one before that would be called antepenultima. And if we want to use chords according to our today's understanding of cadences, while still maintaining the archaic feel of these cadences, there is a few guidelines that can be followed. First, when using modal cadences, we try to reach the finalis in the top voice. So we try to have the root of our scale actually in the top voice. And it's best if it's reached with a simple step. So just one whole or half tone would be perfect. But if we took a third step or a prime step, that's still okay. And the construction of antepenultima to penultima to ultima is very reminiscent of what a modern cadence would probably sound. So if we have a, for example, 2-5-1 construction, that would translate really well into antepenultima to penultima to ultima. And well, if we make modal cadences, we can have both kinds of cadences, which are authentic plagal cadences. Authentic cadences reach their root from above, from the fifth or from the seventh step, falling down. And plagal cadences are cadences that actually climb up from the second step or the fourth step to the root. And when using modal cadences, the only thing we have to keep in mind is that our penultima chord, so this one before the root, cannot be diminished. It has to be a minor or a major chord. Else we wouldn't stay very true to the Gregorian scale and their principles, which were about avoiding diminished chords, because the tritone was back then a sign of the devil, which is evil. Well, anyways, let's jump into some examples. For the Dorian scale, we can use all 4 possible penultima chords. So we can use the 7, we can use the 2, we can use the 4 and the 5 to conclude on the root. And that's how that would sound. Should be file number 4. So the first Dorian cadence is a authentic cadence reaching the root from the 7. You will notice the missing leading tone because we don't have a B but a B flat. So there's no semitone going to the C, and the final effect or the closing effect is not very strong therefore. Next one is a plagal cadence going from 2. Next one is a plagal cadence going from the 4th step. And here we have we don't have a step from the penultima to the ultima, but that's okay for a plagal cadence. Okay, next one is a regular 4-5-1 cadence. Sorry, misclick. Well, on to the Phrygian scale and the Phrygian cadences. The issue with Phrygian is that the 5th step of Phrygian, which is in C Phrygian, that would be G, B, B flat, and D flat. That would be diminished, so we can't use the 5th step as penultima. One thing with Phrygian is actually that people modified the 3rd step to be a major 3rd, and that's just always the case. So whenever a Phrygian piece ended, you will have a major chord. Therefore, the E on the final chord. And that's how our Phrygian cadences sound. First, again, an authentic cadence from the 7th step. Sounds a lot like Bach. Next, a plagal one from the 2nd step. And a plagal one from the 4th step. Alright, next should be Lydian cadences. In the Lydian mode, the 4th step is diminished. So the 4th step of C Lydian would be F sharp, A and C, and that's a diminished chord and we can't use that. So we can only use 7, 2 and 5. And that's how they sound. That was the first one, the second one, and the last one, 2-5-1. I keep hitting the wrong button, sorry for that. As you can see, Lydian cadences sound pretty normal. Actually, you could regard the sharp 4th step as some sort of leading note to the 5th step. So it's actually a double cadence in that case. On to Mixolydian. Mixolydian has no diminished chords in its potential penultimas. So the 7th step and the 2nd and the 4th and the 5th step are all major or minor chords. So we have 4 kinds of cadence that we can make. Let's jump right into listening. First one. Second one. Third one. And lastly, one special cadence is the so-called flamenco cadence, which is actually a Phrygian cadence. And it's very characteristic that it has this line in the bass which goes down stepwise and sounds very flamenco-like. So we start on the 4th step of G Phrygian, which is C. Then we go to the 1st root in its 1st inversion. We go to the 7th step, which is F minor. And then we have the Picardy 3rd on our root, so we have a major G chord at the end. I think there's a ton of songs that use this cadence. I think like Feeling Good might be one. Well, lots of them. Well, and that concludes our today's stream about Gregorian modes. I have compiled some examples, music examples that use different modes with clickable links. I'll share the PDF in the thread, and I hope you were able to learn something. Well, see you around.